In today's shir, two topics we're going to deal with. The first topic is getting a finally good understanding of the topic of muktzah, Bezos Hashem. And the second topic is going to be about Nidorim on Shabbos. Very, very appropriate for today because it happens to be that it's Parshas Matos Masei. The Torah talks about Nidorim, and here we are. Our shir also holds by Nidorim. Siyata Dishmaya. This year, like all my other shiurim, are Le'ilu Nishmas, the Menachem ben Akiva, my father, and for the quick release of the hostages, Bezos Hashem. We've been studying this topic of Muktzeh throughout the Masechet. The Masechta, we're about to finish Bezos Hashem Masechet Shabbos tomorrow. Wow. And basically, throughout the Masechta, we have a machlokes between Rab Shimon and Rab Yehuda regarding Muktzeh. Rab Shimon says there is no such concept as Muktzeh. We're going to see what that means. And Rabbi Yehuda says that there is such a concept. Now, of course, Rabbi Shimon believes that there are certain cases where muktzah applies, yet Rabbi Shimon, many cases, Rabbi Yehuda would say muktzah applies where Rabbi Shimon would not. For example, we saw yesterday, Rabbi Yehuda says that if anything is out of your radar, out of your mind on Friday afternoon when Shabbos comes in, if Shabbos comes in and the item was not ready to be used, it cannot be used throughout Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon does not believe in that concept, usually. The other huge machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda holds that if something is set aside from my mind before Shabbos, and on Shabbos I want to change its status, as opposed to the first case, I'm talking here about something which is absolutely usable. A bottle of wine, a twig of wood on Yom Tov, yeah? Anything that is absolutely fine to be used, really good, no muktzah at all. But if in my mind I was maktzeh it, I set it aside for different time, for different use, even using it for the same thing, just for much later, then I am not supposed to use it, move it on Shabbos, according to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Shimon, even if I set it aside for a different time later, I may change my mind in the middle of Shabbos and use it now, and it's not called muktzah. And we saw three opinions, three Amoraim followed Rabbi Yehuda, three Amoraim followed Rabbi Shimon. One of the Amoraim who followed Rabbi Shimon, lahalocha, is Rabbi Yochanan. And that poses a problem, because we saw yesterday, and we'll see today, that we see a Stam Mishnah, we saw different Mishnayos in Maseches Beitza, where it indicates that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that there is a problem of muktzah in all these cases, and Rabbi Yochanan is the one who believes in the rule of halacha kestam mishnah, which means Rabbi Yochanan gives us a rule. Whenever there's a stam mishnah, a mishnah that talks anonymously, the mishnah does not mention a name, it means that that mishnah is a halacha. Rabbi HaKadosh just wrote the mishnah as if that's a simple narrative, and no opinions are mentioned, and that's why this Mishnah is halacha, says Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan also says that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, which means we're more lenient regarding muktzah. And now we're going to see how these two concepts together create a mid-air collision. Boom, they create a problem. Toshma says the Gemara. Let's see a Mishnah. Says the Mishnah in, I think it's a Mishnah in Beitza, if I'm not mistaken. Matchilin b'aremas hateven. Yeah, one supposed to, if one wants to use firewood on Yom Tov, he may start using aremas teven. Aremas teven is basically animal food, but it's a kind of animal food that Rashi says the stamid lasoka. It's animal food that's not so nice for the animals. Teven is usually used for animals, but the teven, if it's sari means doesn't smell nice, not very fresh, not good, then you automatically use it for firewood. Yeah, hay burns very nicely. So if you have the hay that would probably not be used for animals, go ahead and use it for fire, because that mistama what you had in mind before Yom Tov, and on Yom Tov you're allowed to light the fire. However, eitzim in the muktzeh you can't use. Don't get confused. The word muktzeh here does mean the halachic muktzeh. Muktzeh is a storage area in the back of your house. Yeah, in the backyard of one's house. Yeah, there are places. There's a place called muktzeh that is like a storage area. And if you have eitzim, wood in the muktzah, pieces of wood in the muktzah, don't use them. Yeah. Now, how do we understand that? Because those eitzim shebamuktzah are probably meant to be used for fire, but later Rashi says, "Bastav." It's now, let's say, summer, spring. Most Yomim Tovim are then. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot in Eretz Yisrael is not so cold. So you store your pieces of wood, your logs of wood for the winter. Oh, you can't all of a sudden matchil start to use them now for lighting your fire on, let's say, Shavuos. That's a classical Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda believes that if you set aside a bottle of wine for 5 years from now, you can't use it now on Shabbos. Same thing over here. So you see that the Mishnah, but the Stam Mishnah, a Mishnah that sounds like it's just a narrative like that, narrative, is like Rabbi Yehuda. And yet, Rabbi Yochanan Pascha is like Rabbi Shimon. Contradiction. Answers the Gemara, no. Hassam over there, you know what the Mishnah is talking about over there? Be'arzi ve'ashuchi. We talk about erez, cedar wood, and ashuchi is female cedar, male and female cedar wood, are arzi. The muktzah machmas cheslon kis, Rabbi Shimon Moide, explains Rashi. We're not talking there about regular cheap wood that's for fire, just timber for fire. No, we're talking about expensive wood. Your idea is really to build with it. Yeah, Rashi says oimdin labinyan. You have nice mahogany, nice oak, nice good pieces of wood. Your idea is to build with them, not to burn them. And if your idea is you want to build with them, they are a classical case of cheslon kis. What's muktzah machmas cheslon kis? Afilu b'shimin moide. If you have something expensive, something that's set aside for its job, for example, a knife of a shoichet has to be kept very, 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 straight and smooth. Yeah, a shoichet would not allow anybody else to touch his chalif, his knife. Not only because of safety reasons, also because it's going to ruin the knife. A surgeon would never allow his kids to play with his scalpel. He's a brain surgeon. Yeah, I'd like to think that. Why? These are expensive tools, expensive things that are kept for specific purpose. And so too, these arzi bashuchi are nice, expensive pieces of wood. They're going to build your new chalet, your new big fancy home in Vermont. That's not, and therefore those, I feel Shimon Moida. I agree, says Rabbi Yochanan, I pass like Rabbi Shimon. And that Mishnah over there is also like Rabbi Shimon. Because Rabbi Shimon, who does not believe in regular muktzah, he believes in muktzah machmas cheslon kis. By the way, beware of the fact that 90% of the times we pass like Rabbi Shimon. Because all the muktzahs that we believe in, or most of them, are muktzah according to Rabbi Shimon too. Toshma, let's see another Mishnah in Beitza. In fact, what we're going to read now is the last Mishnah in Beitza. Whenever you go to a siyum in Beitza, you always hear that Mishnah. Ein mashkin v'shterchtin es amidborios, aval mashkin v'shterchtin es abaytos. Let me explain. So, there are two types of animals. Let's say sheep, for the sake of argument, whatever. A farmer has two groups of sheep. Some of them dorm indoors in the farm. Some of them are in the dorm, and some of them dorm outside, which means ein mashkin v'shechtin es midborios. Midbar or dabra is a field. Midbar, desert, which means if you have animals, which we've already saw before in Daf Memhei Amud Beis, you have animals who sleep outside the farm, either between Pesach and Cheshvan, good half a year, or according to other opinions of the Tanoim, they sleep outside for the entire year or more. Those animals, let's say the animal who's supposed to be a midbaris, it sleeps outside the farm most of the time. Boom, Shavuos morning, Pesach morning, it's knocking on the door, meh, 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 and it's coming in. Wow, Lassie, come home. Which means what? This is a surprise. This animal was not supposed to be here. We did not plan on shechting that animal. Because Dolly the sheep was supposed to be outside for at least half a year, if not more. Right? and now it came. That was not part of our plan when Yom Tov came. Classical Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein mashkin v'shochtin." What's mashkin? You don't give it a drink. We're not giving it a l'chaim. The idea is that also by Beis Hamikdash, before you shecht an animal, you give it to drink because it's easier then to flay the skin. That's not the main detail here. The point is you can't shecht the animal because even though animals in Yom Tov are not muktzah because they're meant to be shechted, but this animal you did not expect. You thought it's coming back in January, not now, and therefore it's muktzah. That's classical Rabbi Yehuda. Aval mashkin v'shochten is a baitois. Those animals that sleep at home, again, either every night or at least once a few months, they're relatively more of a homebody. They're expected to come home. So when it's knocking on the door, meh, 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 ba, 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 come home. Great, I expected it, I can shecht it. But clearly, again, same problem. We see a Stam Mishnah, and that Stam Mishnah follows who? In Beitza, Stam Mishnah following Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yochanan, who supposed to follow a Stam Mishnah, he lemaise paskins like Rabbi Shimon. What's going on over here? Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan stam achrina ashkach. Rabbi Yochanan found a different stama. True, you have a stama, you have a Mishnah that supports who? That supports Rabbi Yehuda at the end of Beitza. But says Rabbi Yochanan, I'm pulling a card, out of my deck. I have another Mishnah to show you. That Mishnah is a stam like Reb Shimon, and I prefer one stam over the other. Just to be exact, the Mishnah we're about to read is stam that tends to be like Reb Shimon. That is not a regular stam; it's a Bes Hillel versus Bes Shammai. But because we know that Bes Hillel b'mkom Bes Shammai ain't a Mishnah, when Bes Shammai b'mkom Bes Hillel ain't a Mishnah, when we know that Bes Shammai and Bes Hillel argue, it's it's a dead game, and we know that Bes Hillel are the winners. It's considered to be like a stam. What does it say in the Mishnah in Kuf Mem Gimel, in our own Masechta? Regarding Atzomois v'Klipin, I'm going to follow the pshat of Tosfos in that Mishnah because it's simpler. And the Mishnah says as follows. B'Shamai say, Magbin mal shulchan Atzomos v'Klipin. Say B'Shamai, easy. Let's say you have bones and you have peels of fruit at the end of the meal. How does every normal Shabbos table look at the end of the meal? A mess, a wreck, full of bones, full of klipos, all the garbage. According to Tosfos, if you have a dog, or your neighbor has a dog, or a few people around you have dogs, and they would eat the bones, you're allowed to take the bones with your own bare hands, even though a bone would be muktzah. It's not muktzah. The klipin also, you have peels. You have whichever peel, orange peels, and you have some vegetarian animal who likes to eat the peels, you can take it, it's not muktzah. And that's what Bes Shammai say. Now, it's confusing now because we're going to switch Bes Shammai Bes Hillel soon, but that opinion that says it's almost a clipping are okay because you can use it for the animal, it's not so simple. Why? Because even if you can use it for the animal, but Lamaisa, when Shabbos came in, when that chicken was nice, crispy and good and good smelling, you didn't think of your animal. Your main idea was for human being consumption. The chicken on the whole. All of a sudden, the chicken is out, and now you only have the bones. It's a new thing. Now, all of a sudden, you're turning it to animal food. Yeah, when you had the nice lush orange on your countertop, you want it for human beings, not for animals. So there is this again switch, and if you say that it's okay to switch from Friday afternoon into Shabbos, that seems to be following Reb Shimon, not Reb Yehuda. Basil say no, it's muktzah. You can't use the samosuklipin because even though now they became edible for animals, beforehand, when they were part of the good food, of the good chicken and the good orange, they were part of human food. So Basil say they remain muktzah throughout Shabbos, like Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore you can't actually pick the actual bones and give them to Rexy the dog. You have to just take the whole table itself, the top of the table, they used to have it those days, and tilt it min hatzad. Tiltul min hatzad indirectly is allowed. Now, I know it's confusing because it looks like the one who supports Rabbi Yehuda is actually Bes Hillel. V'amar Nachman, anu ein lanu lebes Shammai Rabbi Yehuda, Bes Hillel Rabbi Shimon. Oh, says Rav Nachman, don't get confused. That Mishnah is wrong. Time and again, we see that the Amoraim argue about how the Mishnah was written, and now Nachman says, no, that we have to switch the opinions, meaning the ones who say that it's okay to take the bones like Reb Shimon are Bes Hillel, and the ones who say it's not okay, like Reb Yehuda, are Bes Shammai. Oh, so once you have Bes Hillel supporting Reb Shimon, it's even according to, I saw the Rosh today, the Rosh in Bchoros, it says, when you have a Mishnah that brings Beis Hillel, it's even better than a Stam Mishnah, because we know Halacha is like Beis Hillel. It's more than just an anonymous Mishnah. It's Beis Hillel, they are number one. And therefore we know Halacha is like Reb Shimon. Oh, you came in a good time? Pligiba. We're in Daf Kuf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. Aren't you super excited? The last Daf of Maseches Shabbos. The longest Masechta in Shas in words. Pligi, the longest Masechta is Bava Basra, but not in words, only in Dapim. Pligi Baravacha Veravina. Now Ravach and Ravina argue regarding Halacha L'Maisa. Shall we paskin like Rabbi Shimon or like Rabbi Yehuda? Ravach and Ravina argue as follows. Chad Amar, one of them says, B'chol Shabbos kula halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. The entire Shabbos, meaning regarding all halachas of muktzeh, halachas of Rabbi Shimon, lebar mi muktzeh machmas mius. What's muktzeh machmas mius? Let's say you have something disgusting. That item, it's not just my choice. I want to use it later. I want to use it now. The muktzeh itself, the item itself, is ma'us. How do you say ma'us in English? Disgusting, right? Mind you, what is it, for example? Ner yoshon, which means, even though b'muktzeh machmas mius, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda argue, here we support the opinion of who? Of Rabbi Yehuda, the ner yoshon. Ner yoshon means as follows. Not our old candles. Ner yoshon means you have a candle, and the candle is made out of clay, or some earthenware, and the oil that was there before is absorbed and it stinks, doesn't smell nice. Nowadays we don't live such life, but imagine yourself something used and not very pleasant. So that kind of muktzeh, because it's disgusting, there we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that it's really a muktzeh, you can't move it around. However, the other opinion says, remember, there's those two opinions, Ravach and Ravina. The other one says, B'muktzeh machmas mius nami halacha ki Reb Shimon. In muktzeh machmas mius, halacha is like Reb Shimon. And therefore what? Halacha is that you may move around muktzeh machmas mius. By the way, that's halacha. Muktzeh machmas mius is allowed. As far as I remember from the Mishnah Brura, muktzeh machmas mius will follow Reb Shimon. So what is the exception to the rule? Lebar mi muktzeh machmas isur. Oh, muktzeh machmas isur is a very interesting kind of muktzeh. I'm going to discuss it soon. Muktzeh machmas isur is something that we all believe is muktzeh against the opinion of Reb Shimon. What's muktzeh machmas isur? Ner shedliku b'bois Shabbos. A ner, a candle that was lit, on Friday afternoon. Candles. Let's say you have candles with tape. That's very nugget today. What does your wife do? Your mother do? Your sister do on when Shabbos comes in? I think all Jewish women all around the world, well, most of them, you light candles. What happens to the candlesticks? Maybe we should move them around because, I need the space. Everybody knows it's not supposed to do that. Why not exactly? It's called muktzeh machmas isur. What's muktzeh machmas isur? So muktzeh machmas isur means that in order to use that item, you have to break an isur. That's Agdor. Says I saw today, just to brush it up, and I again consulted with my friend, the big Talmid Chochem, Rebbe Aaron Yaakov, and we discussed it, and he showed me, and we looked at it. It was very nice. Basically, the story is as follows. We saw in Chulin Daf Yudaled, it says that a behema that you shechted on Shabbos, Chilul Shabbos, besides the problem of Chilul Shabbos, it's muktzeh. Why is it muktzeh? Because the animal, when Shabbos came in, is muktzeh machmas isur. Why? Because says the Ramban and the Rashba, one quoting the other, I think I saw the Ramban, he says, no, he will Masiach died to Mimena because of the isur. Get what I'm saying? Because you can't shecht an animal on Shabbos, and the only way you can benefit from the meat of the animal is through shchita. There's no other way. Therefore, your mind is removed from it because you know that the only way to approach it is through an isser. Same thing with the candle. Look at Rashi over there in Chulin Yudalid. You hear, Akiva? Rashi says that over there, by candle, how can you benefit from the candlestick itself? If you want a benefit from it when it's empty, you have to extinguish the fire. That's not allowed. You want to take the candlestick and use it for a different reason to, I don't know, get it as a paper holder. If it's still lit without putting it out, without extinguishing, then it's also a problem. You can't move it around because when the fire is on, then you can't move around the candle. Yeah, because it's going to flicker and it's going to be machabe mavir all the time. So any muktzah that you can't use, there's a barrier of prohibition. For example, fruit that are connected to the ground, to the tree. Why are the muktzah? Same thing. The only way I can benefit from them, real benefit, boy is through picking them. That's also in Shabbos. So ner shedluka b'yis Shabbos. In that we believe that Reb Shimon is not lahalacha. It's not lahalacha, and we pass him that it's osir, and it's true. That's halacha. Halacha is ner that was lit at the beginning of Shabbos and muktzah the entire Shabbos. Aval muktzah machmas chesron kis. But let's say, as we said before, a muktzah, an item that's expensive and is meant for specific professional use, like chesron kis. Even Reb Shimon admits that it's muktzah ditnan. It says in the Mishnah that we saw previously in Perek Kol HaKelim, right? It says over there, Kol HaKelim nitolin b'Shabbos, around Kuf Chaf Gimel area. Kol HaKelim nitolin b'Shabbos. All kelim, all tools, utensils, kelim that were manufactured somewhere, they're all allowed to be used on Shabbos, right? They're allowed to be used and not used, they're allowed to be moved on Shabbos. Even a pen, even a pencil, even a hammer, you can't move them for whichever reason, but you can move them l'tzoch gufoy mekoymoy. You can move them if you need it for a different use, remember? It's not shinui. No, not shinui. Let's say you want to crack a nut. You have a nut that you need to crack, yeah? And you don't have a nut cracker, you can take a hammer and use it. Or if you need the space of the hammer. But there are types of kelim that you cannot use on Shabbos at all. You can't move on Shabbos. Chutz mi mesar godol v'yosef shel machresha. What's mesar godol? A big saw. A big saw that's used for cutting wood, and it's sensitive because you have to keep you have to keep it serrated and very, very sharply serrated, very, very, precisely just that, sharp enough. And if you start playing around with it and using it for your cheese or your, I don't know what, scratch your feet, it's not going to work. It's going to ruin it. It's an expensive tool. The Yosef Shel Machresha, a plow. A plow apparently has to also stay very sharp. The sharp bottom part of the plow in the ground has to stay sharp and nice. You can't start playing around with it. And therefore, Muktzah Machmas Chesron Kis, halach is like Reb Shimon that it is Muktzah. So let's summarize. Halach is like Reb Shimon, which means Stam as muktzah because I decided in my own mind that I'm going to use that wood next month and not now for firewood, doesn't mean it's muktzah, right? That's so we follow Reb Shimon, not Reb Yehuda. And when it comes to makmas mius, we also follow Reb Shimon. You can take something that is not pleasant, take it away. Yeah, that you can move it around because as long as it's a kli, it's okay. Now another thing is even when it comes to muktzah machmas isur. Yeah, then halacha is like Rab Shimon. Halacha is like Rab Yehuda, and you can't use muktzah machmas isur. And also, muktzah machmas chesron kis. Everyone agrees, even Rab Shimon, that it's muktzah. Yeah, you can't move around the cliff for whichever reason in the world. You can't take machmas chesron kis because it's so set apart in your mind from any usage in Shabbos. You can't use it. Okay, it's all about how remote is it from your mind. That's the idea. How remote is it in your mind from normal use? That's the idea.
What do you mean remote?
How far is it? In other words, that kli, let's say you're a surgeon. We gave the example before you came. The person is a surgeon, menateach, and he has a very, very fancy scalpel, some kind of very, very, very refined, expensive kind of utensil that he's using. He's going to let his child play with it, dolly, or eat with it. Of course not. Chas v'shalom. It's going to destroy the kli. That's muktzah because it's extremely, remote in your mind from everyday use. That's muktzah. Rabbi Sai, the last Mishnah of Maseches Shabbos, Kol HaKavod, and Reb Tzvi, our dear friend, is with us every day on Zoom. Says the Mishnah, Mefirin Edorim b'Shabbos, Asiyata Dishmaya, look, we have a Mishnah here that discusses something from this week's Parsha. What does it say in this week's Parsha? If a father listens to his daughter up until the age of 12 and a half, or a husband listens to his wife and hears that she made a neder, he has the right, as the man of the house, to mefer, to break her neder, to annul her neder completely. Mefir nedorim b'Shabbos. The chiddush of the Mishnah is that even though one's not supposed to paskan halacha on Shabbos, one's not supposed to create any halachic reality, such as the Toros Nedorim, Maisres, Tvilas Kelim, all these things. I'm using many different examples, but you can't create a halachic reality such as psak of let's say tarfus or kashrus on Shabbos, generally speaking, by korbanos for sure not. Nevertheless, mefirin nedorim b'Shabbos, a man may be mefer and break, annul his wife's neder on Shabbos. V'nisholin lenedorim shen letzorach haShabbos. What about nisholin? That's hatoras nedorim. Hatoras nedorim is not haforas nedorim. The second case of the Mishnah is if a man or a woman don't have a neder, now they want to go to the chacham, to either a one talmid chacham or three adyotos, and they're not breaking their vow. The chacham asks him or her, had you known the vow would have been so difficult, had you done it? And he says, no, I wouldn't. So there is a shaila. You can undo. You don't break it. You undo it only through a chacham. That too can be done on Shabbos, providing shelatzorcha Shabbos. Oh, you see, in the second case, we said you can only do it if the neder is for the need of Shabbos. Let's say the person made a neder that they're not going to eat on Shabbos. Yeah, they made the neder not to eat on Shabbos. That's the Shabbos is about eating. How can you spend Shabbos without cholent, kishkas, liba, gala? Yeah, if you made the neder, break the neder straight away, or nishal the neder. That's the second case. Now, from here to the end of the Mishnah, I'm not going to the Mishnah from now till the end will be explained better in Mirz Hashem in tomorrow's shiur. I already prepared you I already downloaded the very nice picture that describes the second part of the Mishnah, but now we're just going to read it. Continues the Mishnah. The Mishnah is basically describing one case that happened once in the times of the Tanoim, a case of Tumah V'Tara, a Tumas Mace, and then the story was as follows. The halachos that came out of that Tumah V'Tara case are as follows. Mar is a window. One is allowed to take a piece of wood and under certain conditions stick it by the window to darken the window. Back then, not everybody had shades, So you take a piece of wood and you stick it in the window to darken the house. So that you're allowed to do on Shabbos, like the opinion of Tanakama against Oblezer in Daf Kuf Kafei Kuf Kaf Vav, and you're allowed to do that, and it's not called bone because you're gonna stick it in and out the whole time. It's not a permanent thing. It's just really closing a window. Therefore, it's allowed on Shabbos. And we continue. Umoidin in a samatlis. What's moidin in a samatlis? You're allowed to also measure a shmate. What do you measure a shmate? You can take a rag. Let's say a rag was tomeh, and that rag that somehow received tuma fell or touched tyrus. You're a Talmid Chacham. You eat your food b'tahara, and now that shmate, which is tomeh, touched your food, boom, like that. So now, what are you allowed to do? Well, you can measure. Why? Because if that piece of fabric, if that rag is less than 3 fingers by 3 fingers, less than shol shetzbos by shol shetzbos, then it's not a problem. Because less than 3 by 3 fingers is not metame, not nitma. We saw that around Daf Chavav, Chav Zayin, and again around I think Samch Daled, I think. Umoidid in a samatlis. And why? Why are you allowed to do that? Because although measuring is not allowed on Shabbos, midorabonon, because measuring you may come to write, uvda dechol, writing, selling, measuring, you can't stop measuring your height on Shabbos for no reason, or go on the scale. However, matlis, because it's Tumah V'Tara, it's a Dvar Mitzvah, the food, the Tara, that's why it's allowed. And the third case, modin is a mikveh. Let's say there's a mikveh, assuming you may go to mikveh on Shabbos. We discussed that. Tefillah b'zman mitzvah. Lamaisa, women today go to mikveh on Shabbos. I'm not going to the question of the hot water. Yeah, I'm not going to go now into the hot water, but lamaisa to measure whether the mikveh is arboim so, yeah, 3 by 1 by 1, that is arboim so. You have to measure. You have to know if there aren't enough water in the mikveh, your wife's in trouble, and so are you. Umaisa. Oh, here comes the story I told about before. Umaisa b'mei aviv shel mitzodok u'b'mei abba shel ben botnis. There was a story in the times of these two heilig Yutanoim, Reb Tzodok's father, Abba shel ben botnis. The story is, I'll read it inside the Mishnah, just go a little bit through the picture, and then we'll continue. Shepokaku es samar betafiach. There was a window of a house. That house had a dead person inside of it, right? So they pokaku es samar betafiach. They stopped, there was a window of a house next to the house of a mace. This is a mace, right? And there was a window right across the hall from it, yeah, across the street. And they stopped it, they stuffed it with a kli cheres, right? And that was allowed, and that was supposed to stop the tumor from coming. And that also shows you that you're allowed to do it on Shabbos. It happened on Shabbos. They wanted to stop the tumor from coming through the window, so they stuffed the window with the back of that kli cheres, because kli cheres from its back is not mekabel tumor. The kosher is a mekida begemi. They also took.
They didn't want the tumor to move.
Exactly, to spread. Good word, thank you. The kosher is a mekida begemi. They also took a mekida, which is another type of kli cheres, and they tied it with gemi with a reed. Now that tying usually is also on Shabbos. They did a tying that's also with the Rabbanon, and here they allowed it. Why did they do that? Because mekida begemi leida and yesh begigis potach tefach im lav, which means there was a gigis. You see, there was a street with no roof, but the only thing that could bring the tuma and roof above it was a gigis, a bowl, and they wanted to see if there's tefach or no tefach by that bowl. Now, because if there's an opening of more than a tefach, then it's good, the tuma goes up and everything is fine. If the crack is less than tefach, then the tuma stays and it's bad news. So they took a kli whom. Come here, look at the picture. Come here. Look at the picture. And they saw, look, here's you see? That would bring the tumor. Yeah, everybody in Torah anytime can see as well. You see, that gigis brings the tumor from one house to the other. You understand?
Ah.
Now, if you have a crack in the middle, that's tefach, then it's fine. Because then the tefach is big enough. No, it goes up to Shemaim, yeah, and it doesn't go to the other house, right? Masha'en can, if it's less than tefach, then it's continuous. Then it's continuous, and then enochinami, yeah, it will be a problem. So they took a kli whom they knew is tefach big, and they could measure against it, and they tied it. So they measured and they tied. I am not to measure and tie on Shabbos. You see, they did it, the big rabbanim. Aha. From here we see you're allowed to stuff the window. You're allowed to measure for dvar mitzvah. And you're allowed to tie not kesher shel kayomo chas v'sholom. Kesher she'eno shel kayomo. A kesher which is not permanent. Sorry. A kesher that's not permanent. Temporary. Normally is also the Rabbanon. Your Rabbanon allow it for Dvar Mitzvah. Zog the Gemara, we have to continue because we only have this year, Mirz Hashem, and tomorrow. Ibai lehu. Now they had a question regarding the Dorim. From now till the end of the shir, we're going to discuss the Dorim. Ibai lehu. They had a question by the Rabbanon. Hafaro. Remember there are two cases mentioned in the Mishnah. Hafaro and Hatoro, right? Hafara means the woman goes to the husband and told him in the middle of Shabbos, I was noider not to eat sholent. Ooh. Or I'm saying two examples on purpose. Or I was noider never in my life to enter a Mazda, and the family car is Mazda. They only have one car. Yeah. So let's say she made a neder either connected to Shabbos or not connected to Shabbos, right? And now comes the question. Hafara. Does the Mishnah come to tell me that the husband is allowed to be mefer and break his wife's vow whether it's for the need of Shabbos, Cholent, or not for Tzarech Shabbos, it's for Mazda. She's Shomer Shabbos. She won't enter Mazda anyways till Sunday, right? So, is the Hafar you allowed to do both for Shabbos need and not Shabbos need? However, the She'ela, when you go to the Chacham, L'tzorach in, Shelo L'tzorach loy. A She'ela for a Chacham to knock on the door of the Chacham on Shabbos and say, hey, Rabbi, community Orthodox Rabbi, my wife over here has a neder and she needs to undo the neder. Maybe that's only the tzorach of cholent because you need it for today. But if you want to talk to the chacham about what's going to happen on Sunday, come on Sunday. Meaning, by the husband, right? The only time a husband can be mefer to his wife is when? On the same day. In this week's parsha, Beyoim Shom'oy, it says, the day the husband hears about it, even if she was not there yesterday, if he hears about it today, there's Machlokes Tanoim, in Nedorim Ein Vav, and then into Ein Zayin. Does the husband have enough time until the end of this particular day? Let's say it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he has till Shkia, about 7, let's say. Or is it a 24 hours period? But the time that the husband can be mefer is definitely limited. Oh, so that makes sense. Maybe when it comes to the Mazda, even though on Shabbos she will never enter a Mazda or any car or anything, Lamaisa, it's time sensitive. Motzei Shabbos is in 2 hours. If he's not going to mefer now, it's now or never. And according to some Tanoi, some Rishonim, if he kept quiet and he kept her neder, she cannot go later to the Chacham. Wow. She's stuck for life. And maybe because of that, we say that when it comes to the husband, even if it's not a Shabbos need, the mere fact that the husband is time limited alone means he has to do it today, he has to do the Afara. Oh, Mashenk and the Chacham, no. The Chacham, if it's for the need of Shabbos, yes. If it's not for the need of Shabbos, come on Sunday. Why? Because we realize that the Farah or HaTorah are halachic procedures which are not ideally done on Shabbos. So we try to minimize it for urgent cases of emergency. That's why the Mishnah mentioned them in a different way. Look at the Mishnah. Let's go back to the Mishnah. Mefir nedor b'Shabbos, always, whether it's tzorch Shabbos or not. When it comes to the Talmid Chacham, you can't bother him stamp for things to do the week. Come during the week. Come on Wednesday. Therefore, with the Chacham, only things that are for the need of Shabbos, you can do the She'ela. Very good. That's one way. Oy Dilma, or maybe not. Oy Dilma Hafar Nami, L'tzorchin Shelo Tzorach Loy. No. Maybe Hafar too. We're limiting the girl, and we say, and the husband, we say, no. Even Hafar of the husband should only be done if it's for the Tzorach of Shabbos. But if you want to do Hafar's Nadorim for her using the Mazda, or going into elevators, or putting makeup, all kinds of weekdays activities, no, maybe that in Achnami don't, right? Don't bother me now on Shabbos, because Shabbos is not supposed to do. Only Tzorach Shabbos, not things of the Chol. What's going to happen on Sunday? Tough luck. I don't know. Although later we're going to see that there is a solution. If so, why did the Mishnah divide one from the other? Why did the Mishnah mention them separately? Mefirin in general and Isholim Tzorich Shabbos. Yeah, you know why? That's why. Meaning, Hafara, you don't need Beis Din for Hafara. Hafara is less of a halachic act. Hafara is just a husband, indoors. It's a, in the family business, right? It's inside job. You don't need a Beis Din of 3 people or a big Talmud Chacham. Husband, wife, they talk. She says, I'm neither not to eat tomatoes. And he says, yes, really, tomatoes, Hafara. Later. Then you don't need Beis Din. And therefore, we mentioned Mefirin. The She'ela tzricha Beis Din. She'ela requires Beis Din. It's more of a procedure. And therefore, we say no. By Hafar, because it needs Beis Din, we mention it separately. We mention it separately from the first one. Yeah, but Lamaisa, halachically, they're the same. The Chiddush is that even though She'ela has more of a presence, more of a halachic ramification and the whole process, you're still allowed to do it on Shabbos. Toshma. Now, let's try and get some clarity over here. The Tani Zuti the Bear of Papa. Yeah, the Zuti from the Yeshiva of Rav Papa says, Mafir in Ador b'Shabbos, Letzorich HaShabbos. Oh, They say clearly, Nedorim on Shabbos, even when it comes to husband and wife, father and daughter, is only those kinds of Nedorim that apply, that are relevant for Shabbos. I won't eat cholent, I won't eat rogalach, I'm not going to do things you do on Shabbos, those things. Letzorach Shabbos in, shalot tzorach Shabbos loy. But if on Shabbos she is neither not to use the Mazda, not to use the motorcycle. I'm joking. Yeah, you know about the motorcycle? Yeah, that's an inside jokes. Yeah, or whatever. Not to put on makeup. You know, she doesn't put on makeup on Shabbos, or not to whatever drive or something. That we'll deal with it later. And if we can't deal with it later, tough. But if it's not something of Shabbos, she's not supposed to be made for. He's not supposed to make for the neder if it's not Shabbos related. That's one way. Lishna Achrina. Now, the second Lishna gives more hope to what's going to happen after Shabbos, how the woman may get out of it, even if the husband is not doing the Afara. Let's see what the Lishna Achrina says. Iboilahu, according to the other Lishna, the other version, the question, the head in Besmedrash is as follows. Letzoirech, is it, does the Mishnah mean Letzoirech atarvayu ktani? The word Letzoirech goes on both, refers to both Hafara and very good and Hatorah, and V'shalol Letzorech loy, meaning both Hatorah and Hafara are only Tzorech Shabbos. That's much more limiting. Alma, before we continue, opa, let's stop right there. As I told you, now I'm going to explain a bit more. There's a big machlokes Tanoim, Nedorim Ein Vov, Ein Zayin, and so when the Torah limited the time frame of the husband's hafara, what did the Torah mean? There are two psukim, each one seems to be saying something different. Do we say that the husband can be made for till the evening of that day, till the end of the day, biyoim shomoy, right? Or does he have 24 hours? Because it says miyom leyoim, from day to day, which means, let's talk about Shabbat. Do you keep Shabbat? Good. Let's say, good mood, end of Masechta. What happens as follows. The husband heard 2 hours before the end of Shabbos, or 1 hour, half an hour, half an hour before the end of Shabbos. He just heard that his wife was noider, yeah, not to drive the Mazda, something chol-oriented, ever. Neder. Koina malai Mazda. She hates the car. That's it. She can't take it anymore. She had a fight with him about the car. She's making an neder. I'm not entering a Mazda. Oh, now, that's a huge difference. If you're telling me that he only has till the end of the day, that's time sensitive. He only has half an hour. Of course, he has to be made for now, because before the end of the day, you got to act quickly. Because once it's Motzei Shabbos, that's it. Out the window. She will never enter a Mazda in her life. Some Rishonim say she can't go to a Chacham. On the other hand, what? Because could be the husband was Mekayim. She can't overrun what he did. It's a big machlokes Rishonim in the dorm. There are three opinions. I wish I had time now, Alavai, but it's a big problem. Now. What happens? Second opinion. According to the second opinion, if now is half an hour before the end of Shabbos, let's say 7 o'clock, whatever, you have till 7 o'clock Sunday. Sunday is a nice relaxed day. You have the entire Sunday to make for the neder. You will enter the Mazda. So now very good. According to the first sad, shalol tzorech loy, he's not allowed to be made for a neder which is not Shabbos oriented. He's not allowed to be made for her neder of never entering a Mazda, Suzuki, or Tesla ever. Alma, a false nedor meis leis. You know why? Not because we're being difficult. On the contrary, because we believe the first nedor is 24 hours. So what's the problem? He heard about it 2 hours before the end of Shabbos. He has until 2 hours before the end of Sunday. He has 24 hours. So what's the urgency? If it's not urgent, why should you start mixing with Nedarim on Shabbos? It's not a good thing. You're not supposed to l'chatchila be made for Nedarim. What's the big urgency? Deal with it on Sunday morning, and you're not working. Or Dilma, or maybe Kiktani letzorech ashelu diktani. The other side says no. You know when is it that you are limited to Nedarim of only tzorech Shabbos you're allowed to be matir? That's the Chacham, because the Chacham, if she wants to be neder about the Mazda or the car or the motorcycle or makeup, the Chol, go to the Chacham any other day of the week. He's open every day. אבל הפורס נדורים, אפילו שלא לצורך, הפורס נדוrim, you say no, הפורס נדוrim is time sensitive, and therefore the husband has to do the Hafara right now on Shabbos. Why is it so urgent? Because this side believes the other Tanoim in Nedorim, הפורס נדוrim אפילו שלא לצורך. You know why? Hafaras Nedorim kol hayoim. Hafaras Nedorim means the entire day, which means Hafaras Nedorim lo letzorech, because it's time sensitive. Hafaras Nedorim, yes, you should be made for the neder right now, even though it's a chol tikkun neder, to do with the car, to do with the writing, to do with using a computer or a phone. She's no, never to use the phone, and big tzaddikas. Yeah, kind of a live phone. Oh, very nice, with a big tichel. Then what? The Hafaras Nedorim, yeah, he has to be made for right away. Because why? Only till the end of the day. You only have half an hour to be made for Mr. Husband. Better do it right now. And that's why we're allowed to do it even right now, because even for Nedorim that are not Shabbos related, because you're running out of time. Toshma, thank you for the patience. The Tanya of Zuti, the Bear of Papi, Mefir Nedorim b'Shabbos, Letzorcha Shabbos. Again, the same statement exactly, which comes as the conclusion. The neder you're allowed to be made for on Shabbos is only for the need of Shabbos. Letzorcha Shabbos in, Letzorcha Shabbos loi. Any neder that is not Shabbos oriented, not Shabbos related, that neder you cannot break now, Mr. Husband. Alma, that proves to us, no rush, vos brent, ma boer, do it tomorrow, because the false nedorim, you heard it 3 o'clock in the afternoon Shabbos, you have the time until 3 o'clock Sunday, and therefore it's okay. I will stop here, because we really don't have time. Tomorrow, I love you tomorrow. Omar Avashi. Remember? Tomorrow we're holding an Omar Avashi Vanan Tanan, and hopefully we'll get very close to the end of the Masechta, and then with the whole story here with the window and the Tuma. Omar Avashi. Okay? Omar Avashi. Tomorrow, Atzlacha V'rocha. We're going to Ma'ariv now. Whoa! One more day. Unbelievable. Whoever's in Ramat Beit Shemesh, please come to my house. Be'ezras Hashem for the Siyum. 6:30 on Wednesday, Be'ezras Hashem. Shkoyach and thank you.